In this video, I'm going to talk about a kind of special case where you shot stereo 180 VR footage from two angles, and you want to combine it in a stereo 360 sequence. Um, you could do this just for special effect or as a collage, but there's also a strategy that's started to be called Nodal VR, where you shoot 180 in one direction and then turn the camera exactly 180 degrees and shoot 180 in the other direction as a way of kind of hiding all the behind the scenes and also profiting from the nicer lenses that you can use to create stereo 180. So how do we deal with it in post? Two stereo 180s at the same time on opposite sides of a 360. Here is my strategy. This is a project that's set up for stereo 180. If we look at our sequence settings, this was shot on a Views XR camera that has the option of shooting either mono 360 or stereo 180. The resolution it shoots is 5760 by 2880. That's a 2-to-1. And when it's dealing with stereo, it handles it side by side. So the frame remains 2-to-1. As you can see, the left eye and the right eye are kind of sat next to each other side by side. So that's how it encodes stereo. So if you were just trying to deliver stereo 180 from a camera like this, you would say VR properties are equirectangular, stereo side by side, and then the horizontal captured view would read 180. When we view this as the simulated VR video display, we can look up and down, but we can't look side to side if our viewport is 180 degrees, because that's all there is. There isn't anything else besides this 180 degree shot. But I would like to put another angle in the same sequence. So I'm going to change those sequence settings to 5760 by 5760, 1-to-1 aspect ratio. I'm going to change to stereo over under and 360. You might think, well, why do we need to change the type of stereo? But there's a good reason for that. I'll get to it in a minute. But trust me on this one, stereo over under. So we're going to hit OK and OK. And immediately you're going to think, oh no, what do we do? We broke our footage. But if we jump out, we'll see why. It's still showing the same video, but now it's expecting the stereo information to be over and under. So everything is warped and screwy right now, and we're going to fix that by going to Effects and grabbing the VR projection effect. We can throw this on our footage. We'll leave stretch to fill frame checked, but we're going to uncheck input auto VR properties. We're going to feed those in manually. This was originally a stereo side-by-side 180, so we need to tell Premiere that. And so now we look more like what we would expect. 180, and then we turn to the back and there's nothing back there. So I'm going to add my second node. I'm going to grab the other piece of footage, and this will have the same problem. So we throw VR projection on it, change it to the appropriate stereo side-by-side 180, and now the last step is they're on top of each other. So I'm going to use the pan setting that's right inside of VR projection, turn that around 180, and I've got two stereo 180s in one 360 composition. If that's all you're after, that's all there is to it. But I can take us a step further and explain why the over-under method is useful. So I shot this footage as two stereo 180s in the same space, but I didn't shoot it with the intention of perfect nodal seamlessness. They're just two shots. It's not like we just turned the camera around perfectly 180. They don't line up. You're going to see this seam along the ceiling, and everywhere along the 180. And the reason for that was that wasn't the look I was going for. I intended to use more than two 180s in each composition and kind of put like strips of windows into 180 footage all around. So if we want more than two 180s in a composition, or we just want to be able to crop in and have background video or collaged video show, that's where going over under is really helpful with stereo footage. So let me show you a procedure that I've cooked up to make this possible. If we grab yet another piece of 180 footage, here's me juggling. I'm going to throw this onto the timeline as well. And this would require some of the same prep to get it to be over under and all that business. But if we try to go through that process and crop it down, which is my goal, let me show you the problem that arises. So I've got it all set up, and I'd like to throw a crop effect on it. But when I do, I find out that even though the top and bottom aren't set to crop at all right now, they are cropping. And this, like so many effects that were designed for non-VR video, I think is just an artifact of effects conflicting with one another once we get the VR projection involved. So I'm going to handle this a little differently. I'm going to delete the VR projection, and I'm going to nest this clip inside its own nested sequence. So we're going to right click on the, in this case, the juggling clip, and choose nest. And I will call this juggling. And it's going to show up as its own sequence inside my project window. And if I double click on the newly green clip in my timeline, I will jump out to a separate timeline, a sequence that is just this juggling clip. So we're going to kind of quarantine some of the effects inside this sequence and then do other effects out on the nested sequence in the main sequence. If that doesn't make any sense, just follow along and it will become clear. So I'm going to throw the VR projection effect onto the clip inside the nested sequence. I'm going to follow the same procedure we've been doing, just taking off that auto, stereo side by side, and 180. And now this looks as it should, as sort of like a prepared clip. Now we're going to jump back to the dual 180s. And if I throw crop on this now, on top of that green clip, the nested sequence, it doesn't auto crop to the middle, and it allows me to crop in the left or right. And this is where doing that over under format pays off, because I knew I wanted to crop in and just show part of the 180. I need to be able to crop in vertically and get both eyes at the same time. If this was stereo side by side, the crop effect would be cropping each eye differently, so to speak. So the last step here is, rather than rotate this around the frame using the panning that's inherent to the VR projection effect, I'm going to use the VR rotate sphere effect out here on the nested sequence. And this is just from experience. This way works and the other way doesn't. It's going to screw up your geometry in one way or another if you try to do it to the individual juggling clip, but it works out on the nested sequence. So I could now, if I wanted, start to build multiple layers of stereoscopic VR video that was shot. I could drop one on this seam. I could get as many as I feel like fitting if I want to crop in. And each of these windows in headset would be stereoscopic. And I can make them as wide as 180 or crop in and make them narrower. The last thing I would point out is that as we start to build a sequence that has lots and lots of high definition footage running with multiple effects on it, you may start to have performance issues. If you go down to this fraction pull down that's right underneath your program monitor window, this might be running at full or half for you. If you knock it down to a quarter or an eighth or even a 16th, it can look pretty fuzzy while you play the material back, but it will at least play without dropping too many frames. And it doesn't have any effect on output quality. This is just a preview quality adjustment. So that can help you if you're working on a laptop or a computer that's even more bogged down than this adjustment can fix, then I would suggest you get into a proxy workflow, because all of this footage is likely to be H.264 coming out of your camera. And if so, that can be pretty hard on a computer processor. It might be better to work in a low resolution ProRes proxy. I can show you how to make that happen in another tutorial. But this is how you deal with multiple stereo 180s and getting them into a stereo 360 sequence.